Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Acosta, you're the President's second choice for Secretary of Labor, and I'll be honest, I'm glad it's not his first choice, Andrew Puzder, who's sitting here today. It is hard to imagine a candidate who would be worse than a man who made his fortune by squeezing workers on wages and benefits, a man who repeatedly broke the laws that he would be charged with enforcing, a man who bragged about replacing his workers with robots who would never sue him for race or sex discrimination. But that said, the test for Secretary of Labor is not, are you better than Andrew Puzder? The test is, will you stand up for 150 million American workers? And that starts by making sure that workers are safe on their jobs. A Department of Labor rule to protect 2.3 million American workers from exposure to lethal cancer-causing silica went into effect last summer. So I just want to know, Mr. Acosta, will you promise not to weaken the silica rule in any way and not to delay future compliance by even a single day?
Senator, as you mentioned, the silica rule went into effect. I should, however, make clear that the President, through an executive action, has directed all cabinet secretaries to put together a group to review all rules within each cabinet agency.
I'm aware of that.
And to examine, and so
This is a rule that has gone into effect.
Yes, Senator.
And I just want to make sure you're not going to delay this rule any further.
Senator, I understand. The point that I'm trying to make is that the President has directed each cabinet officer to review all rules and to make determinations if any rules should be revised. And so based on that executive action, I cannot make a commitment without, because the Department of Labor has been ordered to review all rules.
Well, I want to understand what that means when you say Department of Labor has been ordered to review all rules. You're about to be named as Secretary of Labor, and your name goes on the bottom line for enforcing the law. Either you're going to stand up for 150 million American workers, including people who are being poisoned by silica, or you're not. And I think that's a fair question for us to ask. Are you going to stand up for the people? Finally, we have a rule in place so that people will not be poisoned by silica.
Senator.
And you're saying that's just open? And you don't want to give an answer one way or the other on how you look at that?
Senator, what I am saying is that the rule is in effect, but there is an order. The final rule went into, was promulgated, but there is an order, an executive action asking all cabinet
And you can't give us your own sense of whether or not the silica rule is something that ought to be enforced? You're going to do this review, and you're telling me you can't tell whether or not we ought to just take out rules that will cause people to die?
Senator, I am not advocating taking out rules. I am making the point.
Can I take that then as you will enforce that rule?
Senator, it is, all cabinet officers have been asked to review.
You've said that, and I've heard it.
Fair
I'm
enough.
trying to ask for your opinion, and you're telling me evidently that you want to be Secretary of Labor, but you have no opinion on whether or not high on your list of priorities would be to protect a rule that keeps people from being poisoned.
Senator, high on the list of priorities will be to protect the safety of workers with appropriate rules.
And you will decide what appropriate rules are, but you don't want to give a hint right now?
Senator, there is an entire staff at the Department of Labor.
Yes, there is. And they've already looked at this rule. And they already have comments on this rule. And they have already received comments from the public about this rule. And they strongly support this rule. And I raised this rule with you when we talked about it 2 weeks ago. So there should be no surprise that I'm asking you about this.
And I gave the same answer. And I look forward to hearing from that staff, if confirmed, their views on this.
And following their advice?
If that advice is appropriate, yes.
And you will decide if it's appropriate. I think we've got how this dance works. Let me ask you another question. Another huge responsibility of the Secretary is to make sure that workers are paid fairly. And last December, a new Labor Department rule requiring employers to pay their workers overtime when they work more than 40 hours a week was set to go into effect. It would mean a raise for 4.2 million people. Lots of employers were preparing to comply, but just days before the deadline, a Texas judge blocked the rule, siding with giant companies over American workers. Will you commit to appealing the judge's ruling to protect these workers?
Senator, as I previously mentioned, I will commit to examining both the rule and the legal basis of the judge's decision.
Let me stop you there. I appreciate that because that's exactly what you said to me 2 weeks ago. You've had time to take a look at it, and it's not a long ruling. To read the ruling and to look at the comments, to look what went behind this, I think it's time now for an answer. Are you going to appeal it or not?
Senator, again, the Department of Labor has staff that spent a long time working on this rule. It is also in litigation. I think it would be important to consult with the legal officers at DOL regarding the position that they're taking in litigation.
Mr.
We're a
Acosta.
minute over, Senator.
All right, I'll quit there, but I'll say, Mr. Acosta, the department advisors have already made clear their position. I just want to know if you're going to follow through on it. They had prepared an appeal. That evidently, at least by measuring their actions, is their advice. I just want to know that you're going to be part of that.
We'll have time for a second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Acosta, so far you've refused to answer my questions, hiding behind an executive order that President Trump issued asking agency heads to review pending regulations. But I'm not asking you how you will respond to President Trump's executive order. I'm asking you about what your priorities will be if you're confirmed as Secretary of Labor. You'll be called on for your judgment. And hardworking Americans want to know what your values are, what it is that you prioritize. And so far, you've said you can't commit to enforcing a rule to protect 2.3 million Americans from exposure to lethal cancer-causing silica. And you won't commit to appeal an injunction to the Labor Department's overtime rule that would give 4.2 million Americans a $1.5 billion raise in a single year. So let me try a third one. Let's see if you'll protect workers saving for their retirements from financial advisors who would cheat them. On April 10th, a Labor Department rule is set to go into effect that will require advisors to recommend retirement products that are in the customer's best interest instead of products that give advisors the highest commissions or the fanciest prizes. Those conflicts of interest now cost Americans $17 billion every year. President Trump has said he is currently working on a 60-day delay of the April 10th implementation date. So my question is, if you are confirmed before this delay is finalized, will you promise to stop it?
Senator, there is an executive action that addresses with specificity the fiduciary rule. And it has asked the Department of Labor to look at the rule and to assess specific questions. Will the rule reduce the investment options available to investors, I believe was one of them. Will the rule increase litigation? Will the rule financially impact retiree investors? And the executive action, as I recall, directs the Secretary of Labor and the Department of Labor to repeal or revise the fiduciary rule if any of the criteria laid out in that executive order is found. And so that criteria really regulates and determines the Department of Labor's approach to the fiduciary rule.
Well, so that's the question I'm asking you. We know, for example, that a 60-day delay is estimated to cost Americans about $3.7 billion that they're just going to get cheated out of by unscrupulous retirement counselors. And that's money they'll never get back. That is gone to them. So that's the question I'm trying to ask about where your values lie, how you see what this retirement rule does, how committed you are to protecting the American investor here and retirees so they have a chance to retire with some dignity.
So, Senator, I don't have access to the specific numbers that you have. But if the question is, do I think it's important to protect the American retiree? Absolutely. And I understand that particularly with the demographic changes that we're seeing, retirees are shifting from 401ks to IRAs, and that the protections under IRAs.
So let me stop you there. So you think it's important to protect, because the chairman rightly will catch me for being overtime. You think it's important to protect retirees? I think it's important to protect retirees. We've got a rule here that will protect retirees, documented to the terms of $17 billion a year. So I just want to know generally, do you support this rule? You think this rule is a good idea?
Senator, with respect, the rule goes far beyond simply addressing the standard of conduct that investment advisors.
How does it go beyond addressing the standard of conduct of investment advisors? I've read this rule. This is about the standard of conduct, and it says the standard of conduct is an investment advisor can no longer recommend products that are going to earn a whole lot more money for the investment advisor at the cost of giving a worse product to the person, the retiree, the investor. That's it, that's all it's about. That is what it's about, is that conduct. So that's the question I'm asking on behalf of millions of retirees around this country. Do you support this rule?
Senator, with respect, there is an executive action that directs how the Department of Labor will approach this rule. If I'm confirmed as Secretary of Labor, I believe and support my following executive orders of the President, who would be my boss.
Well, you know, I have to say, Mr. Acosta, this has really been frustrating. You have dodged every one of my questions. None of these were trick questions. I asked you exactly these questions when you were in my office 2 weeks ago, and you said in all three cases, not that you would hide behind an executive order from Trump, you said you would get me answers to these. Now, I understand that you may not want to answer my questions, but there are about 150 million American workers who are pretty interested in the answers to these questions. These are questions that determine whether or not they can go to work every day without worrying about getting lung cancer at their workplace, whether they're going to be paid fairly for the work when they have it, so they'll have enough money to put food on the table and send their kids to college, and whether after a lifetime of back-breaking work, they're going to have a chance to retire with some dignity. If you can't give me straight answers on your views on this, not hide behind an executive order, but your views on this, and commit to stand up for workers on these obvious and very important issues, then I don't have any confidence you're the right person for this job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.